Welcome to Lynn's Warriors, where we fight every day to protect children, defend the vulnerable, and expose the uncomfortable truths most are afraid to talk about. Today, we're honored to welcome back a true survivor, I'm going to say a survivor because she's a warrior and she's doing so much in this space of talking about victims. I hope, Jen, you don't mind I called you like a survivor. Maybe that's not the right word for you. I should just call you a warrior because you are doing so much in this space to talk about victims and cases and really dissecting. I like to say slice, dice, and analyze for us what's going on behind all of these headlines that there's so much information about, like one doesn't know where to turn. But Jen Coffindaffer, Warriors, you know her, you love her, former FBI special agent, criminal analyst, whose Break the Case podcast has become a must listen for anyone who cares about justice, truth, and the victims left behind in cold files and broken systems. From years of chasing fugitives now to breaking down these high profile cases with clarity and courage. That's why we love Jen. She's pulling back the curtain on what really happens behind, as I said, all these headlines and what still needs to be done. And if you care about justice, child protection, trafficking, any kind of victims, what the mainstream media refuses to say out loud, you're in the right place. So please follow and support Jen Coffindaffer. Everything will be in the body of this video. She's very active on X, Coffindaffer FBI, and also subscribe, share, and listen to Break the Case podcast, available on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, every platform known to everybody. Let's get into it. Welcome, Jen Coffindaffer, back to the Warriors.
Lynn, thanks for having me. I always love being on this show, in large part because of you, but also because of your audience and what they stand for and what the purpose of this platform is all about. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for those kind words. Now I got to start with, I called you a survivor. It just came out of my mouth before. Do you consider yourself like a survivor of all of this? I mean, spending, decades in the FBI and chasing criminals and analyzing. Would you call yourself some sort of like crime survivor or no?
Well, I'm a survivor because I was attacked and I survived it. So I consider myself a very fortunate survivor in a physical sense from what happened. But beyond that, I don't consider myself a survivor in that vein. I consider myself a warrior like you. I mean, we have a mission, and our mission is truth. Our mission is justice.
Yes.
Sadly, it's not as sexy as people who want to get on and gossip and put down other creators and just kind of have a flurry of a soap opera. That is not what our soapbox is. Our soapbox is helping victims. Our soapbox is advocating. It's bringing truth to a lot of fictional characterizations when it comes to true crime.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Jen, because we never sway. We just stick with the truth. We stick with the facts. We keep going. But I can't say, sometimes I see people and I'll say to myself, wow, that is not a fact. That is not a truth. And I'll see them getting all this traffic and then people repeating this information on their platforms. And I say, no. This is not the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to throw it back at you. And thank you for always providing, I'm going to use the word clarity again and facts and truths, because you really make me think, especially when I look at your X account and see what you're covering on a daily basis. It's very helpful to me as a warrior. I want to start at the beginning. I want to cover today this Bryan Kohberger case. I know you've been on it from the beginning. I want to know exactly what's going on. Let's jump in from the beginning. What first drew you to this case? And now what has evolved with you since the early days of this investigation? It's kind of a mouthful what I just said to you, but yeah, the platform is yours.
November 13th, 2022, four absolutely beautiful college students, Xana, Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Maddie Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves, were brutally massacred. And there's no other way to say it than this, Lynn, because the K-bar knife was used. And sometimes people say, Jen, why do you keep talking about that K-bar knife? Well, K-bar knife, the only purpose of it is to murder, is to kill, is to mutilate, period. It's used in law enforcement. It's used in the military. It's used by hunters. And that's the purpose of it. I won't get into all the gory details, but it is so wickedly sharp that it can be used to, slice open a deer or whatever. And that was the choice of the weapon that was used in this case. Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder involving these kids. I call them kids because my kids are this age. And you ask what drew me to this. Well, that in large part is why. My daughter looks like exactly a cross between Maddie and Kaylee, who were the victims. It's unbelievable. She was the same age, my son the same age as Ethan Chapin when he was murdered. So I think that that's kind of initially what draws you. And the other thing is, as somebody who has been an investigator and was an agent in the federal government for 28 years, this was unique. You had literally 4 murders in one place, which in and of itself is unique. You had, as I mentioned, this was a vicious crime. This wasn't a shooting. This was a vicious, up close and personal slaughter of these kids. And you had a whodunit from the standpoint of it took 5 weeks for law enforcement to get their man, which when you look at this case, it wasn't somebody that these kids know. And anytime you have a murder that takes place by somebody outside the inner circle, the outer circle, somebody that is really more of a stranger, they're very difficult to solve.
I just remember, Jen, I remember asking you a long time ago, could have been a year ago. I don't remember. I remember thinking, and I'm no crime expert, to be honest, when they knocked down that house, I remember asking you, like, why did they knock the house down? Isn't that going to be like the site of everything, like for a long time? Just refresh our memory about that a little bit, because that still kind of bothers me. Should I be bothered by it or not?
Yeah, my view was, and the view of many people, was it shouldn't have been knocked down. Look, there is so much evidence that can be maintained in the nooks and crannies of a house. I mean, we saw blood literally seeping out of that house because the amount of blood that these kids lost when they were murdered. So nooks, crannies, crevices hold secrets sometimes. And you combine that with the fact that, at least in my view, there is nothing better than being able to go to a crime scene. Because when I say that, if you're working on a case, because you have to understand the proximities, and nothing that is done in video ever really makes you understand that. In other words, what does it look like when you look up that stairwell? How low are those ceilings really? What does the sound sound like? Can I hear somebody going up the stairs? Can I hear somebody on the other floor? Can I hear things outside? And I think these would have been all important questions for the jurors to be able to touch and feel. And we've seen it be very important in cases like the Alec Murdaugh case, where jurors said that visit to that location really helped them reach their conclusion in that case, and multiple other cases where crime scenes are used to help the jury understand the case.
Oh, you always make me think of a million things, Jen. I'm all over the place now. I have to go back to the stairs. Let me just throw things at you a little bit. I did read another young woman was coming down the stairs or something, or he was coming down and she was going up. There was some sort of interaction, but she didn't get killed. What happened with that?
Yeah, let me lay this out for you because I didn't do the best job in the opening. Maddie Mogen and Xana Kernodle, Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves were in a 3rd-story bedroom, and they were both sleeping in the same bed. They had been out all night, at the Corner Club, which is like the little college bar. And then they went to the Grubhub truck afterwards and had, snacks. They took a Uber ride home. And so really at about 2:00 in the morning, they arrived home and they went up there and, they were calling boyfriends or old boyfriends, and they were just doing what girls do, what we all do in college after a night out. And they fell asleep. On a second floor, second story bedroom was Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Now, they had been out, but at a fraternity party. And they had gone out again, had a great time. They were back home. And Ethan did not live there, but he was visiting Xana. He ends up passing out on the bed, and Xana is up until 4 in the morning, scrolling and looking on TikTok. And then also, she actually ordered DoorDash and got some Jack in the Box food. So she was up and awake at 4 a.m. The other roommates were Dylan Mortensen, who was also across the way, but on the second floor below where Kaylee and Maddie's room was. And then on the first floor was Bethany Funk's room, and that's where she was. And everybody was pretty much asleep except for Xana. And then Dylan was awakened by this different commotion. She heard Kaylee's dog, Murphy. She heard different cries, different talk. She actually heard who everybody believes was Bryan Kohberger say, "I'm here to help you." Xana Kernodle is believed to have come out of her room, go up those stairs or partially up those stairs, see Bryan Kohberger, I believe from the evidence, recede back to her room where she was murdered. Ethan Chapin, again, sound asleep in his bed, was then murdered. If you believe the Dateline source, which everybody pretty much believes the Dateline source at this point, let me tell you why. In the first Dateline episode called 1122 King Road, and I really highly recommend you see this. It's very good. It's a 2-hour-long special, and it just lays out all the details for those wondering what really happened. In that, there was source information about the K-bar knife being purchased by Bryan Kohberger. Well, sure enough, it was. In the subsequent Dateline special, again, a long special, definitely recommend you watch this one as well. In this special, it goes into a lot of this detail about Xana coming up, starting to ascend the stairs, being murdered at that point. And a lot of other details came out in that the judge overseeing the case, Lynn, was so upset about this leak, he ordered, without the defense or the prosecution asking, he ordered a major investigation. So right now there's an investigation with particular individuals assigned to oversee it, to find out who the leak was. That is how much the information, I think, was truthful and on point from the Dateline sources. And we'll see who ends up being the leak. I think they'll figure it out. They also leaked video of Bryan Kohberger's vehicle going, back and forth around the house before it finally parked. So there were a lot of details leaked. And so that's how we came to know about Xana, really for the first time.
Wow. One of the reasons when I heard this plea deal was going down, I kept thinking of Jen, the parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I could think about. So I started digging around a little bit, and I came across a couple of things. I don't know if they're true or not. Things like he was a loner in high school. Again, I don't know if this is true. This is just other people reporting. He may have been bullied in high school. He may have been reaching out, or maybe he was. You can clear it up on Instagram. I think these young people had a pretty big presence, right, online with their Instagram or Snapchat accounts or something like that. I was reading about that. Again, you'll clear that up. And that he was reaching out through DMs, direct messaging, to one or both of the girls that just hi or something like that. And they were perhaps ignoring him. Again, we don't know. I don't know. This is just things I've been reading and piecing together. And we know from our work at the Warriors that, when somebody becomes ignored like this, certain people become so enraged and they actually go and try to confront somebody, even if it's a stranger. What did you hear about anything I just said to you? Did you hear or read, or are there any facts like this in the case?
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with a writer Volsch is his last name. If you ever look him up, it's Volschche. And he and I worked together on actually an entire project and paper regarding Bryan Kohberger and his early years, and did a lot of interviews and things, and wrote a paper. And then People magazine actually bought it and then used part of our writing for an article they did about Bryan Kohberger. So I feel pretty confident in understanding Bryan Kohberger's upbringing. I think he came from a very, supportive family. He has sisters. They're all doing very well. His family was your normal middle class type family. But Bryan Kohberger's definitely had issues very early, bullied. He was awkward. He wasn't well liked, not the popular kid. He was well over 100 pounds overweight. He was gigantic. He developed a heroin addiction when he was in high school. He ended up losing that weight and kicking his heroin habit, and ended up actually becoming everything from a kickboxer to a really advanced runner, running 6-minute miles according to Strava information. He really turned his life around from a physical standpoint, but mentally he suffered from what they call visual snow, where your whole visual view of everything is clouded by a snowy appearance, kind of like our old televisions, Lynn. He also purportedly had problems with ringing in his ears and things like this. But he excelled academically. He definitely, I think, wanted to be the most liked guy in the room instead of the guy in the room that nobody saw. But he was maniacal and, in my opinion, evil, sociopathic. This wasn't a spur of the moment. I think this was very well planned. I think he idolized serial killers like Ted Bundy and Dennis Rader. He planned more like Dennis Rader. But a lot of criminal psychiatrists, psychologists say he was much more like Bundy in terms of the sexual desire to really mutilate women.
Now we heard, what I want to say, Jen, is people throw this at me a lot. It's all about the parents. But I always throw back, listen, I've known great parents. The kids do not turn out well. And I've known horrible parents. I don't know how the kids turn out so well, kind of thing. So you're pointing out that his parents, you think he came from a pretty decent background, a pretty decent family. And it seems like, well, I can't help but thinking about it. I saw the picture of the father in the car with him after all this went down. He was pulled over for something, some traffic something. What about the parents now? What about the father in particular? Do we think the father helped him with all of this after this crime? Or what's the story with him, with the father?
Well, it's interesting, Lynn, because Bryan Kohberger he received his undergraduate degrees, both associates in criminology and then his bachelor's. And then he went on to get his master's at DeSales. He studied under Catherine Ramsland, who studied profusely Bind, Torture, and Kill Dennis Rader. In fact, she was his counselor and his teacher in 4 different classes. He then was accepted into the graduate program at Washington, and that is where Washington State, and that is, of course, he lived in Pullman, Washington, which is just, under 10 minutes away from Moscow, Idaho, which is where the University of Idaho was. So these communities were very intertwined with one another. And his father had flown back essentially to drive back with him to Pennsylvania on the break. Now, the interesting part of all of this, of course, was after the murders were committed. This was after he knew he was in big trouble at the university and was likely going to lose his TA position. There were all sorts of issues with how he was intersecting with students. And then it came to a boiling point because he was also having a lot of issues how he was intersecting with the people who were over him. And I really believe, and I believed it a long time ago, that this was kind of the critical incident that kind of pushed him over the edge, all of the issues he was having in the workplace. And typically there's a proximal type of terrible situation that happens before somebody erupts like this. It to me was boiling inside of him, and something he had planned and dreamed about and visualized and fantasized about probably for years. But what made him on November 13th do it? I think it was a proximal event where he wanted to lash out at that particular time.
Wow. Let's talk about the families. I can't even begin to imagine what they've gone through, what they continue to go through, for the rest of their lives. I understand that 2 of the families are okay with this plea deal, and 2 of the families are not. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then also, one of the families was talking about the autopsy report was released, and one of the girls, she had her face, I don't know, beaten, I think is what I read, and her head beaten. So lay this all out for us and your thoughts about this plea deal, if you want to share those with us too.
Well, first, let's talk about Xana Kernodle. So Xana Kernodle's mom is a struggling, highly addicted mother, in and out of prison, mostly on the streets. It's just a sad situation. She has said long ago that she was, just generally speaking, not for the death penalty. The aunt of Xana Kernodle has said she very much was very upset over this plea deal and did not agree with the plea deal. Maddie Mogen's father, who himself has had struggles, he said he was just ready to get this behind. He needed sort of some closure and was just ready for all of this to be done. And then if you look at the Goncalves family, Kaylee's parents, they have from the beginning been the most vocal of all the parents. They have, really pushed law enforcement, I think especially very early on, for answers. They have always been not in agreement with the prosecutor on this case for a lot of different reasons. They have not been one to believe in the gag order. I think they wanted people to know the gruesome details and to understand what their children suffered. I think they did not like the idea of a cloak of secrecy and everything kept from the public. And they are absolutely enraged over this plea deal. They received some information that a plea might be negotiated on Friday. Before they could even set up a meeting or any face-to-face or anything else, they were notified by Sunday. So just, a day and a half later or so, that it was done. It had been signed, we're done, it's going to happen. And then, of course, we all watched the plea. And for anybody who watched that plea, it's almost unheard of that somebody pleads and has to say yes. Did you kill Maddie? Yes. Did you kill Ethan? Yes. Did you blah, blah, blah? Yes answers. There were 5 yes answers to the burglary and the 4 murders. That's it. Normally, individuals have to say what they did. I planned this, I went in. You don't have to get into gruesome details, but you should have to talk about what you did. You should also have to talk about the fact that knife has never been found. Well, where did you put it? Where were all the bloody clothes? How did all of this happen in terms of the time frame going in? Did you have a plastic bag that you took everything outer layer off, put it in that plastic bag, and then had clothes underneath? That's what many of us think. Is that what really happened? He didn't have to give any details. So that was terrible. Finally, Ethan Chapin's family, right after this all happened, they took a sabbatical. He is a triplet, so his two siblings also, were his age on campus. It's been horrible for them, but they're very religious. They sequestered themselves, and they swore that this was not going to define them, their families, and that they weren't going to be victimized any further. And they were fine with the plea deal. They're just, to me, how I would hope I would handle a situation like this. Although I think I would probably handle it like Mr. Goncalves, because I would be so angry at them taking my little girl. So that's kind of the smorgasbord of how these parents are dealing with it.
I don't know, Jen, when it comes to, my children, and this guy will still get up every day, eat, maybe read a book, maybe watch TV, maybe go out in the yard and walk around, whatever. I don't think I could be so. We don't know, thank goodness, but like I don't know if I could be so forgiving, frankly, to something so horrific that I have so many questions. And part of the plea deal, so he didn't have to answer any of these questions at all. He was like a yes or no. That's it for his answers. I mean, what a slap in the face, in my opinion, to the families.
It really was. There's normally an allocution, where they have to discuss what they did. They have to own it. They have to feel that, in any case I've ever had, they will get up and give a narrative about what happened. Hi, I sold, 50 kilos every week from my apartment to, various, whatever. It's something. It's not, were you a drug dealer? Yes. Did you sell this?
But
yes.
Why? But why? What was the difference here? That's just the way it was structured? Like what? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but what's the...
I think that was the deal that they reached. Now, I will say, and I think this is very important to denote, none of us have seen the plea deal. I have not seen it. If anybody else has, I haven't seen it. I'm constantly lurking and looking for treasures like that. Like today, we got to see the actual sheet of paper that he signed that was his plea, and I posted that right away. But I haven't seen the plea deal. These deals are long. They're pages and pages, typically, going through the imaginations of what they're agreeing to and the legalities involved. I haven't seen it. So, normally in there, you have to proffer, meaning you have to meet with agents. And when I've been involved in those, especially comes to mind a gang case I had where I interviewed about 45 gang members pursuant to their proffers, and for hours and days, some of them, to get everything from the minute they were born to the minute they were incarcerated about their lives, all their criminal activity, their gang signs, their language, everything. So we could understand, first of all, the Crip society. But this is normal. Everybody they'd murdered, everybody that they ripped, everything, enemies, blah, blah, blah. For this not to have anything that we know about anyway, and to not be proffered, for them not to be able to know where that knife is and where the bloody clothes were put, I'm stunned. And I keep hoping that behind the scenes, there's something we don't know, and that maybe he's being interviewed. I keep hoping that this doesn't get to be a book situation. We already know Catherine Ramsland would like to do a book. I think many other people would like to interview him. I really hope it's kept within law enforcement. The Behavioral Science Unit, now called the BAU, Behavioral Analyst Unit. I want them to do that, because I think it is important to chronicle. But you know what? This is one of the most interesting things. Catherine Ramsland, who, as I mentioned, was his teacher in 4 classes and his counselor, in short proximity to when these murders were completed, a quote unquote expert of the behavior of killers, had one right under her nose, and she herself said she was duped. I think that's the exact word.
I read that. I don't
Shocked.
know. I find that hard to believe, but I don't know.
I think it just goes to show, and this is just my belief, they're too good. Those that are psychotic like this, and fully narcissistic and plotting evil like this, you can't know because they're a different person on the outside. And I think people really, something's off, but you can't imagine it could be off to that degree.
Right. Who can think of that type of crime? I mean, let me ask you something. Oh, and just to go back, now, Jen, there are probably movie deals in the works, crime series, docu-series, book deals, because that's just the society we live in today. That's just how it goes. But again, I keep going back to the family, the parents and the siblings, and there's so much focus on him. I mean, rightfully so, but not on them. It's like everything we do at the Warriors. It's always about, the one who does the crime as opposed to that victim or survivor of the crime. We've got to flip the playbook a little bit, but, and perhaps these family members will also do books. I'm sure they're being approached, books and movies or all kinds of things. I hear about these $1 million deals to sit down and do interviews. But we have to ask, Jen, like, people just want to know why he did this. Just why did you do this, Brian? I think that's the big question most people want to know. Why?
Well, and it's interesting, sometimes I say you're never going to know. We're never going to know unless he tells us. But then the funny part about that is that's expecting him to be truthful, really, about anything. He's
exactly
a psychotic killer. But my view always was, before they ever even found Bryan Kohberger, before Bryan Kohberger was even a name, based on the situation in terms of how they were murdered and what happened, I always believed it was some sort of femicide, incel type figure. And now that we know who it is, of course, and have been able to take a deep dive into who Bryan Kohberger is, his upbringing, all the issues he had growing up. I think he had such a rage in him that really very few of us could ever understand how at least he felt, betrayed by women, betrayed by society, thinking that you are an amazing person, the smartest guy in the room, attractive, and to have everybody purportedly ignore you and not think of you as anything, and just have that build up. And no matter what he did, he was still the zero in the corner. And all that rage, that's what I believe came out that night on the 13th. I think it was focused on Maddie Mogen. I think Kaylee happened to be in the bed, which thwarted a lot of his plans for sexual assault. And then as he left, he didn't plan on, Xana being up, had to kill her. He killed Ethan, and he didn't have to kill Ethan. Ethan was passed out in the bed, but he killed Ethan. And according to to the source of Dateline, if you believe, again, this source, which seems highly credible, everything he said so far is checked out, he or her, actually mutilated his legs with the knife, carved up his legs. Why? Because Ethan was really quite essential guy he wished he was, probably.
Wow.
So really vicious.
What do you think, Jen, about all this? Finish us up with, I guess, was justice served? I mean, what's to say about something like this? I just still have so many questions. I think people have questions, but again, I'm so focused on the families. I feel so bad for the families. But what do you think, with your expert opinion? Where do you think this will all go ultimately?
Well, first of all, I think that justice was served from the standpoint of at least he's convicted. We are in the bizarrest times that I've ever seen, where you have social media that's able to sway and persuade and get to jury pools I mean, we saw it in the Karen Reed case. It happens. And quite frankly, there was a huge groundswell of individuals, really, they called them pro-burgers, whatever you want to call them, but they were very much supporting Bryan Kohberger. And it was frightening for anybody who at all understands somebody capable of this. If they were back out, the jeopardy that would put society in. And so from that standpoint, he's behind bars. It's supposed to be life without the possibility of parole. But Lynn, I just have to point out really quick, the Menendez brothers,
yes,
who were given the sentence of life without the possibility of parole, are now have been completely resentenced to 50 years with the possibility of parole. And I know my legal beagles who might be in your audience will say, but Jen, they didn't take a plea deal. It's kind of different. You know, this is in writing. This is going to be, you know, unable to change. Nothing is unable to, there's nothing that can't be changed. That is the one thing I have found out when there's a groundswell, when you have governors, when you have, you know, political figures, Hollywood, get behind a notion, like in the Menendez case, without proof. And we can argue the proof some other day, but that proof did not exist, in my opinion, and in the prosecutor's opinion, and all the law enforcement officers, and in fact, in a lot of the family members who just weren't the ones up on their soapbox. The Menendez brothers, they viciously murdered their parents. I'm going to take it one step further because this is really a bigger case in point. Charles Manson, who led his family of followers to viciously cut up an 8.5-month pregnant Sharon Tate, to, you know, kill the Folgers, to kill the LaBiancas for no reason, to smear their blood all over, to just brutally murder them. And guess who's out right now? Leslie Van Houten. She's out, you know, I tease, she's planting petunias and, you know, talking with her family. She stabbed Miss LaBianca 14 to 16 times. So this isn't about, will she go and do it again now that she's, you know, 60, 70 years old? It's not about that. It's about, was justice really served? But what happens is when it's 50 years later, you know, all these years later, remember, Kohberger is only 30 years old. So just take 30 years from now. Look at the Menendez brothers. Look at and another one, Charlie's Girls is already been approved for parole. We're just waiting to see if it's approved by the governor.
Yeah. So
where's the justice?
Yeah, and what a terrible, you know, just covering extensively the Sean Combs, the Diddy trial here in New York. What a terrible message, Jen, to society, you know, because we saw all these, as I call them, Diddy disciples, really surrounding the courthouse and so supporting him and attacking even media people, just covering it, like really wild stuff going on that many people said they never encountered before. And then we have also in New York that Luigi Mangione. I don't know, he's locked up somewhere, but we have all these, well, where this is what we're told, like millions of dollars. I think this is what I read, being sent to him and women saying they want to marry him and they're supporting him. So I have to say, I guess, I don't know what it is, except social media perhaps has opened up everything, right? It must be so different from when you started your career to what's going on now. And I maintain, Jen, I don't care about jurors. They're if they're not, you know, told to stay in that room or something, and Sean Combs, they could go home at night. I think they're looking at the internet, or I think they're talking about the case. How could they not, right? Like in New York, you were surrounded by it, no matter where you turned. So you bring out a good point. Really, you can murder somebody and okay, maybe you'll do 20, 30 years and you'll big deal. And maybe you'll get out, right? What a terrible message. No consequences, no accountability. Who knows where this will go. Finish us up with the podcast. What's happening with Break the Case? What are you focusing on? What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? What are you talking about now that this case is over? I mean, there's always crime. What's going on with that?
You know, Lynn, I have been so busy from a work standpoint. You may know, I know we've talked about it offline, but I work right now close to full time on other cases.
Yes.
And so unfortunately, I feel like I have not been able to give the time that I have wanted to the podcast. We had been podcasting every single day for the Karen Reed trial. The Karen Reed trial is now over. And obviously, I've podcasted a few times regarding Bryan Kohberger. I have such great plans, but right now I'm so caught up in my real job that it has been just so hard to carve time out to podcast. And but every week, if not twice a week, I'm definitely coming out. I will. The last podcast I did was on Bryan Kohberger, of course,
Right.
and the next one I will be doing upcoming here will be as well, probably about the Idaho forest. Sentencing is around the corner, July 23rd.
Wow. Well, you know what, Jen? Take a breath. It's the summertime. You deserve a little vacation from this crime because it is just crime all the time. I mean, and you've covered things so extensively. Again, with such you make it so easy for me to understand, for all of our warriors to understand what's really going on, because there's so much information thrown at us. Like we don't. I think people just become like sort of habituated, in one ear out the other, where they don't really analyze or question things. Or so thank you for always providing such clarity. I use that word with you, clarity, because there's a lot of not clarity around me. So thank you, Jen Coffindaffer, for doing that. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for your tireless, advocacy. You're fearless. You're working on this every day. I know you work so hard. You are truly a warrior. I mean that in every sense of the word. And I'm so happy that I can call you a friend and an ally and such a strong warrior. And please promise me you'll take a little vacation now after all these tough cases. I know you're working every day hard, but get away from this just a little bit. And there's always time for more crime and to resume with me here in the Warriors. But thanks, Jen. Let us speak again soon.
Thank you, Lynn.